The champagne cork popped like a gunshot across the executive floor. I heard it from my desk on the fourth floor, where I sat alone, packing the last of my personal effects into a cardboard box that had once held printer paper. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was being discarded just as easily as the reams of documents I had processed for Whitmore and Associates over the past 3 years. My name is Joseph Carter. I'm 31 years old, and until 45 minutes ago, I was the senior financial analyst at one of Chicago's most prestigious consulting firms. Now I was just another black man being escorted out of a building where I had generated millions in value, where I had caught errors that saved clients from catastrophic losses, where I had worked weekends while others took credit for my analysis. The official reason for my termination was performance concerns. The real reason was standing 3 floors above me, probably holding a champagne flute and wearing that smug grin I had come to know so well. Derek Whitmore III, the founder's grandson, a man whose only qualification for his position was the accident of his birth. It had started 6 months ago, when I identified a discrepancy in the Patterson account. $300,000 had been moved into a shell company that, upon investigation, traced back to Derek's college roommate. I had done what any ethical analyst would do. I flagged it, documented it, and brought it to my supervisor, Marcus Chen. Marcus had looked at my evidence, then looked at me with something between pity and fear. "Joseph, I need you to understand something," he had said, closing his office door. "Derek is untouchable. His grandfather built this company. His father runs the board. Whatever you think you found, you didn't find it." I should have listened. Instead, I made copies. I created a timeline. I cross-referenced transactions. And I waited for the right moment to present my findings to someone who would actually care. That moment never came. Instead, Derek found out. The retaliation was swift and surgical. Suddenly, my work was being questioned. Reports I had submitted were lost. My access to certain accounts was mysteriously revoked. Colleagues who had once sought my input began avoiding eye contact in the hallways. Then came the meeting that ended everything. It was a Thursday morning, and I had been summoned to the executive conference room on the 7th floor, a space I had never entered in my 3 years at the company. The room smelled of leather and old money, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Lake Michigan. Around the table sat Derek, his father Richard Whitmore Jr., HR Director Patricia Holloway, and several other executives whose names I barely knew. And at the head of the table sat someone I had never seen before. A woman, perhaps 32, with blonde hair pulled back in an elegant chignon. She wore a navy blue suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. And her eyes, ice blue and utterly unreadable, tracked every movement in the room. "Mr. Carter," Richard Whitmore began, not bothering to offer me a seat. "We've received some troubling reports about your conduct." "My conduct, sir?" I kept my voice neutral, professional. I had learned long ago that any display of emotion from a black man in a white boardroom would be interpreted as aggression. Aggressive behavior toward colleagues. Derek spoke up, unable to hide his satisfaction. Making unfounded accusations, creating a hostile work environment. I felt my jaw tighten, but kept my expression calm. "I'm not aware of any such behavior on my part. Could you be more specific?" "Jennifer Walsh has filed a formal complaint," Patricia Holloway said, sliding a document across the table. "She claims you've been intimidating her, making her uncomfortable with your presence." Jennifer Walsh, the administrative assistant who had walked in on me reviewing Derek's financial records. The same Jennifer Walsh who had barely spoken 3 words to me in 3 years. "That's not accurate," I said. "I've never had any negative interaction with Ms. Walsh." "Are you calling her a liar?" Derek's voice dripped with false concern. "That's exactly the kind of aggressive behavior we're talking about. I'm simply stating facts." "Facts?" Richard Whitmore leaned forward. "Here's a fact, Mr. Carter. You've been accessing files outside your authorization. You've been making inquiries into accounts that are none of your concern. And now, you're intimidating the very people who noticed your suspicious behavior." The trap was elegant in its simplicity. I had been investigating Derek's fraud, and they had reframed it as me being the threat. Every piece of evidence I had gathered was now proof of my unauthorized access. Every question I had asked was now suspicious behavior. "This is a setup," I said, knowing even as the words left my mouth that they would be used against me. "And now paranoid accusations." Derek shook his head sadly. "Dad, I think we've seen enough. Mr. Carter, your employment is terminated effective immediately," Richard Whitmore said. "Security will escort you to collect your belongings. Your final paycheck will be mailed." Throughout this entire exchange, the blonde woman at the head of the table had said nothing. But I noticed her watching. Not the executives, not Derek, but me. Her expression remained neutral, but something flickered in those blue eyes. Recognition? Concern? I couldn't tell. As security arrived to escort me out, I paused at the door and turned back. "Whoever you are," I said to the blonde woman, "I hope you're paying attention to what kind of company this really is." I saw Derek's face flush with anger. Richard Whitmore sputtered something about insubordination, but the woman simply held my gaze for a long moment before nodding almost imperceptibly. That was 3 hours ago. Now I was in the lobby, waiting for the Uber that would take me back to my apartment, where I would have to explain to my mother during our weekly call that her son, the first in our family to get a corporate job, the one who was supposed to break the cycle, had just been fired. The elevator chimed and I looked up expecting security coming to verify I had actually left. Instead, the blonde woman stepped out, walking directly toward me. "Mr. Carter." Her voice was lower than I expected, with a slight accent I couldn't place. "I'm Evelyn Shaw. I'm the new majority shareholder of Whitmore & Associates. I acquired controlling interest last month." I stared at her, processing this information. "You own this company?" 62% of it, yes." She glanced around the lobby, then back at me. "I've been reviewing the books. The Patterson account discrepancy you flagged. I found your original documentation in a file that was supposed to have been deleted." My heart hammered in my chest. "You saw my report?" "I saw everything, Mr. Carter, including the security footage of Derek Whitmore shredding documents in the 4th floor copy room at 2 a.m. 3 weeks ago." She paused. "I also saw the way you were treated in that room just now. The way they spoke to you, the way they looked at you. I didn't know what to say. For 3 years I had navigated this world carefully, swallowing insults, accepting being overlooked, watching less qualified white colleagues leapfrog over me for promotions. And now this woman, this stranger, was acknowledging what I had experienced. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Evelyn Shaw looked at me with those unreadable blue eyes. "Because I need someone who understands how this company really works. Someone who sees what others choose to ignore. Someone who can't be bought. I was just fired. I can't come back here. Not as an employee, no." She pulled a business card from her pocket and pressed it into my hand. "But there are other arrangements. Consulting work. Outside the official structure if you're interested in seeing justice served." I looked at the card. Simple white stock, just her name and a phone number. "Think about it, Mr. Carter." She turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry for what happened to you today. Not because you're going to be useful to me, but because it was wrong. What they did was wrong." She walked out through the glass doors, and I watched her climb into a black town car that had been waiting at the curb. I looked down at the card in my hand, then up at the building where I had given 3 years of my life. Somewhere up there, Derek Whitmore was celebrating my destruction, certain that he had buried the evidence and eliminated the threat. He had no idea what was coming. The first time I walked into Evelyn Shaw's private office, 3 weeks after my termination, I understood why she had been sitting at the head of that table. The space occupied the entire penthouse floor of a building downtown that was far more prestigious than anything Whitmore & Associates could claim. Floor-to-ceiling windows on all sides offered panoramic views of the Chicago skyline, and the furniture was modern, minimalist, and probably cost more than most people's houses. "Joseph, thank you for coming." She gestured to a leather chair across from her desk. "I wasn't sure you would." I wasn't sure either. I sat, still trying to read this woman who had appeared in my life like some kind of corporate angel. After I was fired, I assumed I would never set foot in that world again. "I've been sending out resumes. No callbacks." That's because Derek has been working the phones. Evelyn opened a folder on her desk. I have copies of the emails. He's telling everyone you were terminated for theft and fraud. He's using the very crimes he committed as the accusations against you. I felt the familiar cold burn of rage in my chest. But I kept my face calm. I had learned that skill young, growing up in a neighborhood where showing the wrong emotion at the wrong time could get you killed. Corporate America had only reinforced the lesson. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Because I want you to understand the scope of what we're dealing with. She slid the folder across to me. Derek Whitmore III has been embezzling from the company for at least 4 years. The Patterson account was just one example. I've identified at least 7 other instances of funds being diverted to shell companies controlled by his associates. I flipped through the documents, recognizing some of my own early analysis mixed with new information. This is millions of dollars. Approximately 8 million by my current count, and that's just what I've found so far. Evelyn leaned back in her chair. Richard Whitmore, Derek's father, knows about it. He's been covering for his son since the beginning. Patricia Holloway in HR has been helping them bury complaints and intimidate witnesses. Witnesses like me. You're not the first analyst who noticed something wrong. You're just the first one who didn't take the buyout. She paused. The others accepted severance packages with non-disclosure agreements. 6-figure payouts to keep quiet and go away. You were different. They never offered me money. They just destroyed my reputation. Because you scared them. Evelyn's ice blue eyes met mine. A black man who kept records, who documented everything, who couldn't be bought or intimidated. That terrified them. They couldn't control the narrative if you were still out there with evidence. I thought about the files I had copied before my termination, currently stored on an encrypted drive in my apartment. I had been afraid to use them, worried that any action I took would result in lawsuits or worse. But now, what do you want from me, Ms. Shaw? I asked directly. Evelyn, please. She stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. I want a clean house at Whitmore & Associates. I bought the company because it has good bones, strong client relationships, skilled employees, profitable operations. But it's been corrupted from the top down. The Whitmore family has treated it as their personal piggy bank for decades. And you need evidence. I need a full accounting. Every fraudulent transaction, every covered-up complaint, every person who participated in the scheme. She turned back to face me. I need someone who knows the company's systems, someone who can navigate the records without raising suspicion, someone who has already done half the work. I'm officially banned from the premises. They revoked all my access. You'll be consulting for my holding company, different entity, different access points. And you won't be going in through the front door. She returned to her desk and pulled out another document. This is a consulting agreement. Generous compensation, full confidentiality protections, and, most importantly, complete legal backing. If the Whitmores try to come after you, my lawyers will bury them. I read through the agreement carefully. The compensation was indeed generous, more than I had made as a salaried employee. But it was the liability protections that caught my attention. Evelyn Shaw wasn't just hiring me, she was shielding me. Why me? I asked finally. You have resources. You could hire any forensic accounting firm in the country. Why bring back the guy they fired? Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Do you know why I acquired Whitmore & Associates? To make money, I assumed. Partly. But also because I spent 15 years watching my father's company destroyed from within by people just like Derek Whitmore. Her voice was steady, but I detected an undercurrent of old pain. Entitled men who believed that rules applied to everyone but them, who used their positions to enrich themselves while destroying the livelihoods of people who actually built value. I swore I would never let that happen anywhere I had control. She met my eyes again. I want you because you tried to do the right thing when it would have been easier to look away. Because when they threw you out, you didn't crumble. Because I saw your face in that conference room, Joseph. I saw the dignity you maintained while they lied about you. That told me everything I needed to know about your character. I felt something shift in my chest, not just gratitude, though there was that. It was the strange sensation of being truly seen by someone with power. In 31 years, I couldn't remember that ever happening before. "There's something you should know about me," I said. "I don't quit. Once I start something, I see it through. If we do this, I'm going to find everything. Not just enough to fire Derek, everything. Every person who helped him, every person who looked the other way, every dollar that went somewhere it shouldn't have. Are you prepared for that?" Evelyn smiled. The first genuine smile I had seen from her. "I'm counting on it." The next 2 months were the most intense of my professional life. Evelyn set me up in an office adjacent to hers, with secure network access and a direct line to her legal team. I worked 16-hour days, following digital paper trails that wound through shell companies in Delaware, the Cayman Islands, and Luxembourg. What I found was worse than I had imagined. Derek's embezzlement was just the visible tumor. Underneath it was a network of corruption that had been growing for decades. Richard Whitmore Jr. had been skimming from pension funds. Patricia Holloway had accepted payments to bury sexual harassment complaints against senior executives. The company's books showed dozens of consulting fees, paid to entities that didn't appear to do any actual consulting. And everywhere I looked, I found evidence of how they had treated people like me. In the HR files, I discovered records of at least 12 black employees who had been pushed out over the past decade. All had received poor performance reviews that contradicted their documented achievements. All had been offered modest severance packages in exchange for signing away their right to sue. Most had taken the money and moved on. 2 had tried to fight and been destroyed financially by the company's legal team. I wasn't unique. I was just the latest in a long line of casualties. "They've been doing this for years," I told Evelyn during one of our evening briefings. "It's systematic. Every black employee who got too good at their job, who might have been promoted, who might have threatened the established order, they found a way to get rid of them." Evelyn nodded slowly. "I'm not surprised. The Whitmore family has a very specific vision of who belongs in their company." She paused. "My acquisition was controversial enough. A woman, an outsider, someone who didn't come from old Chicago money. They've been fighting me since day one. Then why stay? You could sell your stake and walk away with a significant profit." "Could you?" she asked. "After everything you've seen, could you just walk away?" I thought about the faces in those personnel files. Young black professionals who had worked hard, played by the rules and been destroyed anyway. I thought about my own face in the bathroom mirror after that conference room meeting, practicing the calm expression I would need to maintain while they celebrated my downfall. "No," I admitted, "I couldn't." "Neither can I." We worked late into the night, reviewing evidence and building our case. Somewhere in those long hours, something shifted between us. The conversations extended beyond business into personal histories. Her father's bankruptcy, my mother's sacrifices to send me to college, the specific kind of loneliness that comes from being the only person in the room who looks like you. I began to notice things about Evelyn that had nothing to do with the investigation. The way she tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. The slight laugh lines around her eyes that suggested she hadn't always been this serious. The way her accent, Swedish I eventually learned, became more pronounced when she was tired. I noticed, but I said nothing. There was work to do, and I had learned long ago not to confuse professional relationships with personal ones. 3 weeks before the scheduled annual shareholders meeting, I found the final piece of the puzzle. Derek Whitmore III had been making regular payments to a city inspector named William Reeves. In exchange, Reeves had been approving building projects that didn't meet code requirements, projects developed by companies in which Derek held hidden interests. It wasn't just financial fraud anymore. It was public safety fraud. Buildings across Chicago were potentially at risk. "This changes everything," I told Evelyn. "This isn't just a civil matter. This is criminal." "I know." Her face was grim. "I've already contacted the FBI. They're opening an investigation, but they want us to proceed with the shareholders meeting as planned. They want Derek and Richard to believe everything is normal until they're ready to make arrests." "And after the meeting?" "After the meeting, the Whitmore family's control of this company ends permanently." She met my eyes. along with their freedom if things go as planned. I felt a fierce satisfaction that I knew I should probably examine more closely. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was personal. Derek had tried to destroy me, and now I was about to watch his entire world collapse. "There's something I need to tell you," Evelyn said, interrupting my thoughts. "After this is over, after the meeting, I want you to consider a permanent position. Chief Ethics Officer, reporting directly to me." I stared at her. "That's a C-suite position. You've earned it. More importantly, this company needs someone who will never look the other way." She paused. "And I've come to rely on you, Joseph. Your judgment, your integrity, your perspective. This company would be better with you as part of its leadership. Can I think about it?" "Of course." She smiled, and there was something in that smile that made my heart beat faster than it should have. "Take all the time you need." After the meeting, I walked out of her office that night with my mind racing. In 3 weeks, everything would change. Derek would fall. Richard would fall. The corrupt system they had built would be dismantled. And then what? A new job, certainly. But it was Evelyn's face I couldn't stop thinking about. The way she had looked at me when she made the offer. The way she had said, "I've come to rely on you," as if the words meant more than their surface meaning. I told myself it was just the adrenaline of the investigation. Just the intensity of working closely with someone toward a shared goal. Just projection born of loneliness. But deep down I knew it was more than that. And the most dangerous part was that I was starting to hope it was more for her too. The annual shareholders meeting was held in the grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel, the same venue where Whitmore and Associates had celebrated its 50th anniversary, where generations of Chicago's corporate elite had gathered to toast their mutual success. The irony was not lost on me as I stood in the back of the room, wearing a new suit that Evelyn's team had insisted on purchasing for me, watching Derek Whitmore III work the crowd with the confident ease of someone who believed he had already won. He had seen me when I walked in. For just a moment his mask had slipped, a flash of confusion, then anger, quickly covered with a sneer of contempt. He had whispered something to his father, who had glanced in my direction and then away, dismissive. The disgraced analyst somehow allowed back in the room. They probably assumed I was here for some kind of impotent protest, a last desperate gesture of a man whose career they had already destroyed. They had no idea. Evelyn stood at the front of the room, beautiful in a cream-colored suit that made her blonde hair seem almost luminous under the ballroom lights. She was reviewing notes with her legal team, occasionally glancing toward me with an expression I couldn't quite read. We had barely spoken today. There had been too much to coordinate, too many moving pieces to manage. But in those brief glances I felt the weight of everything we had built together over the past months. The meeting was called to order, and the first hour proceeded according to script. Financial reports, operational updates, the normal machinery of corporate governance. Derek gave a presentation on new client acquisition, smooth and polished, never betraying any awareness that his world was about to end. I waited. At precisely 3:15 p.m., Evelyn stood. "Before we proceed to new business, I have a matter to bring before the shareholders that requires immediate attention." Richard Whitmore frowned. "This isn't on the agenda, Ms. Shaw." "No, it isn't." Evelyn's voice was ice. "The agenda was set by your office." "Richard, and for reasons that will become clear, I couldn't trust your office with this matter." She pressed a button on a small remote, and the screens around the room flickered to life. The first image was a series of bank statements, wire transfers from Whitmore and Associates to shell companies I had traced over months of investigation. "What you're seeing," Evelyn said, "is evidence of systematic fraud perpetrated by members of the Whitmore family against this company and its shareholders. Over the past 4 years, approximately $8 million has been diverted from client accounts and company reserves into entities controlled by Derek Whitmore III and his associates." The room erupted. Derek was on his feet, face crimson. "This is absurd. This is a setup." "These are your own records, Derek." Evelyn's voice cut through the noise. "Your electronic signatures, your access logs, your fingerprints on every transaction." Richard Whitmore stood, pointing at me. "This is that man's doing." He was fired for exactly this kind of misconduct. He's fabricated evidence to— Actually, a new voice interrupted, the FBI has independently verified every document you're seeing. The room went silent as two men in dark suits stepped through the side entrance. I recognized them from my interview 3 days ago. Special Agent Thomas Chen and Special Agent William Harris. They walked to the front of the room with the calm confidence of people who held all the cards. Derek Whitmore III. Agent Chen produced a badge. Richard Whitmore, Jr. You are both under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit bribery. You have the right to remain silent. I watched Derek's face as the reality hit him. The color drained from his cheeks. His eyes darted around the room looking for an ally, an exit, some path of escape. But there was none. Patricia Holloway was being approached by a third agent near the back of the room. The board members Derek had counted on for protection were averting their eyes, already calculating how to distance themselves from the wreckage. You can't do this, Derek sputtered as Agent Harris applied handcuffs. Do you know who my family is? Do you know what my grandfather built? Your grandfather built a company, Evelyn said quietly. You robbed it. Richard Whitmore was escorted past me, and for a moment our eyes met. I saw hatred there, but also fear, and something that might have been grudging recognition. He knew. He knew that I had done this, that the man he had dismissed as a threat had been the one to bring down his entire dynasty. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The aftermath took hours. Statements to federal agents, reassurances to panicked shareholders, crisis communications drafted and distributed. By the time the last of the crowds had dispersed, the sun had set over Lake Michigan, and the ballroom felt like the aftermath of a battle. I found Evelyn on the terrace looking out over the city. The wind had loosened strands of her blonde hair, and she looked tired in a way that was different from our late nights of investigation. This was the exhaustion of responsibility, of knowing that hundreds of people's livelihoods now rested on decisions she would make in the coming weeks. It's done, I said, joining her at the railing. Not quite. She didn't look at me. The company is in chaos. Key personnel are being arrested or questioned. Clients are calling in a panic. The board wants answers I don't have yet. But the corruption is exposed. That's what we wanted. That's what I wanted, she corrected. What did you want, Joseph? I considered the question. 6 months ago, I would have said I wanted justice. 3 months ago, I would have said I wanted vindication. But standing here now, in the quiet after the storm, I wanted to prove that what they did to me, what they did to all of us, mattered, I said finally. That it wouldn't be swept under the rug like every other time. That someone would see it and say, this was wrong. Evelyn turned to face me. In the dim light, her eyes seemed less icy, more human. I saw it. From the very first moment in that conference room, I saw it. The way they looked at you, like you were something to be disposed of. The way they lied with such casual confidence. She paused. It reminded me of my father. The men who destroyed him spoke the same way, with that same certainty that the rules didn't apply to them. Is that why you helped me? Because I reminded you of your father? Partly. She stepped closer. But there was something else. Something about the way you stood there taking everything they threw at you, never breaking. I had never seen anything like it. I kept thinking, who is this man? How does he do this? Years of practice, I said dryly. I know now. Her hand found mine on the railing. Her fingers cool against my skin. I read the files, Joseph. Every complaint that was buried, every career that was destroyed. You were never alone in what happened to you, but you were the only one who fought back. I had help. You took a risk. When I gave you my card that first day, you had every reason to walk away, to cut your losses and move on, but you didn't. Neither did you. We stood in silence for a moment, the city lights glittering before us like a field of stars. I was acutely aware of her hand on mine, of the warmth of her proximity, of the way my heart was beating faster than it should. The job offer I mentioned, Evelyn said softly. Chief Ethics Officer, it's still open. I'll take it. She looked at me, surprise flickering across her features. Just like that? No negotiation. The compensation is fair, the work is meaningful, and I hesitated, then decided that after everything we had been through, honesty was the only appropriate response. And I don't want to stop working with you. These past months, building this case, spending those late nights going through evidence, I haven't felt this alive in years. I haven't felt this seen. Evelyn's grip on my hand tightened. I need to tell you something. Something I've been afraid to say because I didn't want to compromise everything we've built. You don't have to. I do. She took a breath. When I first met you, I saw someone useful, someone who could help me achieve my goals. But somewhere along the way, that changed. I started looking forward to our meetings. I started noticing things, the way you think, the way you speak, the quiet strength you carry everywhere. I started what? Started feeling things I haven't felt in a very long time. For anyone. She looked down at our joined hands. I don't know if that's appropriate. I don't know if it complicates things in ways that will cause problems. But I couldn't let another day pass without telling you. I reached up with my free hand and gently lifted her chin until her eyes met mine. Evelyn, I've been afraid to say this too. Afraid that it was just the intensity of what we were doing or the gratitude I felt for what you gave me. But it's not. It's more than that. What is it? It's you. The way you fight for what's right. The way you saw me when no one else did. The way you make me feel like I belong in spaces where I've always been told I'm an intruder. I paused. I don't know what this becomes, I don't know if it works, but I know I want to find out. Evelyn smiled. Not the controlled professional smile I had seen in boardrooms, but something softer, more vulnerable. I'd like that too. She leaned in, and I met her halfway. The kiss was gentle at first. Tentative, two people testing boundaries that had stood firm for so long. But then her arms came around my neck, and mine around her waist, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like a promise. When we finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, the night had fully settled around us. The city below continued its endless motion, oblivious to the earthquake that had just reshaped one small corner of its corporate landscape. This is going to be complicated, Evelyn said, though she was smiling. Everything worth doing is. The board will talk. The employees will speculate. People will say I promoted you because of this, not because of your qualifications. Let them talk. I touched her face, still marveling that I was allowed to do so. We know the truth. We know what we built together. And honestly, after everything we've faced, gossip seems like a minor concern. That's a very healthy perspective. I've learned some things about what matters and what doesn't. Life's too short to waste on other people's opinions. We stayed on that terrace for a long time, talking about everything and nothing. The future of the company. The trials that would come as the Whitmores faced justice. The legacy we wanted to build together. And quietly, carefully, the personal future we might share. A dinner here. A weekend there. The slow construction of something real between two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. When I finally left the hotel that night, the streets were quiet, and the air was cold. I walked the 3 blocks to the train station, too energized to take a cab, needing the movement to process everything that had happened. A year ago, I had been a cautious man, a man who followed rules and trusted institutions, and believed that if he worked hard enough, the system would eventually recognize his worth. That man had been broken down, dismantled piece by people who saw him as nothing more than an obstacle to their greed. But something new had been built in that man's place. Someone who understood that justice doesn't come to those who wait. It comes to those who fight for it, strategically, patiently, with evidence and allies and an unshakable commitment to the truth. Derek Whitmore was sitting in a federal holding cell tonight. Richard Whitmore would join him there soon. The company they had corrupted was already beginning the painful process of healing. And I, the man they had tried to destroy, was about to become one of its leaders. More than that, I had found something I hadn't been looking for. A partner. An equal. Someone who saw not the color of my skin, or the assumptions that came with it, but the man I actually was. As the train carried me through the night toward home, I thought about all the black professionals who had come before me at Whitmore and Associates, the ones who had been pushed out, bought off, intimidated into silence. They deserved to know that their suffering hadn't been forgotten, that someone had finally held the powerful accountable. Tomorrow there would be work to do, rebuilding, restructuring, the slow process of changing a culture that had been poisoned for decades. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be resistance. There always is when change threatens established power. But for tonight I allowed myself a moment of peace, a moment to feel the satisfaction of victory earned through patience and intelligence, a moment to think about ice blue eyes and a smile that made my heart race, a moment to believe that maybe, just maybe, the world could change, not through violence, not through rage, but through the quiet, relentless pursuit of truth. I smiled as the city lights flickered past my window. This was only the beginning.